Hey there, welcome to Lunar Lunch Break. I'm Evelyn Rose. Welcome to the live stream. I have quite a bit of updates today. The first and foremost, I'm going to pop it on the screen so you can see it, and I'm going to show this to you again toward the end. But the big thing is the schedule change. So currently, Lunar Lunch Break is every week, every Monday at 1 p.m. Beginning in September, we're going to switch these office hours from weekly to monthly. Just this time of year tends to be a lot busier. Schools for my son is starting, which means having to transport him, making sure all the things are done, and some other news that you can kind of see here. So all of those things are um, kind of filling up the schedule. So to make sure that these office hours are as in depth as they've always been, to make sure that I am fully present when I'm here and I'm not rushing off to get to the next thing. Um, I just want to make sure that I have uh, all of this ready for you guys um, on a monthly basis instead. This gives you more time to chime in. There's a whole lot less to catch up on for those of you who catch the replays instead of the live stream. So that's all this is really about, is just trying to consolidate a little bit. I haven't decided if I'm going to extend the full amount of time on the live streams or if they'll remain at that 60-minute benchmark. Those of you who've been following along for a while know that uh, the hour-long sessions sometimes go over that. Oh, and here comes a cat to share all her fur with me. If you've been watching the replays, you have seen the last few times that she has come up here. Oh, watch out, can you not step on the keyboard? Um, the last few times she's come up here, like if you watch the replay after she comes up here, she will have deposited half of her fur on me. And you'll notice that she is a calico. So does she shed all of her fur? No, she specifically will shed the white strands of her fur that show up the most on whatever I'm wearing. um, so we love our kitty. She's a very cute kitty, and when she allows you to, she can be very photogenic, but she simultaneously is very furry. She also is a messy eater. Um, so if I'm not cleaning up her fur, I'm cleaning up her food dish. This is why there's like a whole tray for underneath her food dish, because she is a messy eater. Especially the dry food. It will end up everywhere. I have had to wipe the walls. I'm like, how you get dry food on walls? Don't ask me. I don't know. It's just this one. This one does it. The dog does not. The cat does. Um, anyway, so back to what I was saying before with the schedule change. Again, this is predominantly just to kind of make sure that this time is dedicated time that doesn't go anywhere. It'll also reduce the number of times when I am running behind or have to postpone or cancel. So the whole idea is to make sure that this happens. If there's ever anything that comes up, oh, hi. Um, I will definitely get to your question first thing. So give me just a second to finish up with the intro, and then we will dive in. Um, so the schedule change is mainly just about that, getting it where the schedule is more consistent, where we don't have so many interruptions, and I can really dedicate that time better, especially now the school year is starting up and we're getting into the busy fall season. Um, so again, I'll talk more about this and other updates when we get toward the end. So we're going to go ahead and start getting into the question sessions. So for those of you who've never been here before, this is my weekly office hours. So it's all about your questions dealing with tarot, with it could be witchcraft related topics, more general spirituality, even religious questions, pretty much that whole esoteric, metaphysical, spiritual health realm of things. Um, Usually, I do have a list of running questions from that people have submitted to me ahead of time, although I prioritize whatever is in the chat. So we already have one question in the chat for the session, so that'll be the first one. I also do dual streaming, which means that I'm both on YouTube and Twitch at the moment. I gotta keep an eye on the cat. She's trying to mute me. If I go muted, please tell me that the cat has muted me. I will try to keep an eye on it, but she has been known to mute me and me not notice for like 20 full minutes. So, so these during these sessions, essentially, I go ahead and I prioritize the questions that are in the chat. And if anything requires like a deeper, in-depth response on what I can give in these sessions, by all means, feel free to reach out anytime. I always have all my info in the stream descriptions. If they're not showing up currently, they will show up during the replays. All right, so let me go ahead and get into it. So our first question here from Xander is, what are tarot cards really about? So with tarot cards, I like to joke that they are literally just cardstock and ink. So depending on your perspective, that's either lame or really reassuring. So they are not, divine entities of their own accord. They're not, some secret portal to some whatever. Pick a movie, pick a stereotype, pick a woo-woo response, and I will just remind you all, it's somebody cut down trees, made paper, here's a cardstock, and then they produced ink to print on it. So with tarot is very specifically a set of 78 cards featuring major arcana and minor arcana. It started off predominantly with the minor arcana. These are the ones we recognize from playing cards, because it started as a game. So this is, like you have your hearts, you have your clubs, spades. In tarot, they just change it up based on elemental association. So like instead of hearts, it would be cups, which deal with things like love, romance, and stuff like that. And then you have the major arcana, which are like bigger life theme archetypes. These are usually the images you see like depicted in movies and things like that. So that's your, the death card, the lovers, the star card, the fool, like the fool's journey. And so the minor arcana tends to be more day-to-day type archetypes. What makes tarot so phenomenal once we started using it for spiritual purposes, for self-reflection and things of that nature, is that it touched on universal life themes. So it wasn't, even though its origins are predominantly European, many of its original artwork and interpretations were from a very Eurocentric perspective. However, the meanings behind those cards and the archetypal energy that they were meant to represent and those lived experiences really transcended across cultures, across societies, throughout the world. So as you see tarot being used in this way, spreading, and it was really around like the early 1800s when we really start to see the tarot go from a playing card game to that more spiritual and esoteric use. And you see it really start to spread and get really popular. In conjunction with that, there are other systems of divination using cards, so cartomancy. And these can involve divination. So, this fortune telling in the traditional sense of like laying out your fortunes. Like here's a depiction of your love life and your relationships beyond just the romantic, your finances, career, your home life, your foundations, your own personality and perspectives, emotional challenges. You pick a topic. So fortune telling in that sense. Unfortunately, modern day, we tend to equate fortune telling with future telling. So we think they're meant to be predictive, but it was never really designed that way. Again, it started off as a playing card game. And even once we started to see the more fortune telling and divinatory aspects come in, it was never about precise predictions for the future. It was always meant to be more of that tool for reflection, kind of getting a snapshot of things going on. Let's see. So I consume a lot of media. One of my faves is Persona. Okay. Uses tarot cards, Hermit, Sun, Arcana, Chariot. So I was also intrigued that. Okay, and main character's full card Arcana. Okay, nice. So within the game, they're using the words a little differently that within the universe of that particular game. So when we talk about arcanas in tarot, there's only two: the major and the minor arcana, and all those cards that you mentioned. Like the Hermit, the Sun, Chariot, those are all major arcana cards. And then minor arcana would be like the Three of Wands or the Five of Swords, or the Queen of Cups, for example. So within actual tarot, there's really just the two arcanas. So within the world, the gameplay world, they've used that word to mean something slightly different within the dynamics of the game. I can't remember the last time I played Persona. That was forever ago. I've been out of the I'm like a failed millennial gamer. I was really huge into video games for many years, and then like the whole industry shifted in a way that I just I have other interests and priorities and nerdy stuff. Although, if you ask my son if you get me playing a game, I will get lost for like weeks in that game. So that's another reason why I have to set it aside. My squirrel brain kind of, I have a lot of things I have to prioritize. And so we try to avoid doing that regularly. So it's been quite a while since I've touched Persona, but I do remember that being one of the really cool things about it was it had this way of incorporating tarot into it. And we see that a lot with different media, whether that's video games, movies, TV shows, even, like narrative podcasts, fictional stories, and things of that nature. A lot of times they will draw in uh, the tarot in those ways. I think one of my favorite um, adaptations ever was the anime and manga Escaflowne, where they had a character who she read tarot cards. She also did use the pendulum. And when she gets transported into this very fantasy based world, like it becomes like really core and central her abilities to use these things within that world versus how she would use it at school with her friends back on Earth. Um, so that I felt was a rather realistic within the context of that storyline use of tarot, especially because of how it was on Earth when she would do the readings. And she comments on that, reflects on that throughout the story, where she's like, back before coming here, this was not the way this worked. Like this didn't seem to be this way. So it was a really cool way to show real tarot side by side with this like fantasy story. I would argue it's kind of sci-fi fantasy, but to each their own. I call it sci-fi fantasy. If you've never seen Escaflowne or read Escaflowne, by all means, check it out. That's definitely one of my all-time favorites. I know I'm dating myself by saying that, but that's okay. We know depending on who's listening to me, we all know I'm a cranky old lady. Still young, depending on the audience, but somewhere in the in between. Um, so I have watched 3 episodes. Okay, yes. Oh my gosh, keep watching. I love Escaflowne so much. That's one of those ones where I'm like, it's my son's almost at an age where I'm, he's kind of there. No, I think I'm gonna give him a little bit longer before I introduce him to Escaflowne. Give him another year or two. It can be a little gory at times, especially the, the movie version. But I think he's old enough for the manga though. Might introduce him to that one. All right, but anyway, so yeah, so the real tarot is a little different than what we see in those in the media portrayals. That said, sometimes the media portrayals can be pretty spot on. I remember laughing like almost hysterically when Freakier Friday came out and they had the tarot reader, and she's like trying to pull out her business cards, and she's got like all like 50 different business for all these various different things, and it's like that's actually kind of the reality for many of us who do offer tarot readings in a professional paid capacity. We do tend to also have businesses, or we work as independent contractors across different or freelancers across different things. And so I about died laughing. Now, obviously, that was a fictional portrayal, and they kind of, because they literally swap bodies and all that stuff. But I did crack up laughing over how they brought this really real world tarot reader that we can see this kind of stereotypical tarot reader of the modern day, instead of the old school stereotype of the person in the tent, and think like pick an episode of The Simpsons. There was always, I think, like every decade they have a new episode of The Simpsons featuring where they go in and meet like some sort of psychic in a tent somewhere and they read the future. So it was really, I found it refreshing to see this very modernized take on the stereotypical tarot reader. Yes. Oh, yes. So, and it really depends on the deck too. So there's so many different decks today. So there's the obviously the Rider-Waite Smith is the most common. It's the one that I mostly use, and most every deck I have is based on that. Chances are good any tarot card you're familiar with comes out of that. You have the Thoth, depending on who you're talking to, they pronounce it differently. Tarot deck. So that comes kind of a little bit more hermeticism kind of mixed in. Thus the name. And so that one's a little different, and you do see some decks that are designed based off of that one. And then there's the Tarot de Marseille, which is really funny because if you just say the de Marseille part, I will pronounce that in a stereotypical Americanized way. Like there's past live streams of me doing this where I'll be like Marcellus, which is not how you say it. It's a French word. And so if you do the full French phrase, for some reason I remember the French from high school like is ingrained in me, and it will come out. But if you just put just the Marseille part, I for some reason just go full American with it, and I'm like Marcellus. I have no idea what that is. But yeah, so the Tarot de Marseille is another hugely popular one. Um, so there's different. Those are the three major like categories, if you will. But almost every tarot deck you see today is based on the Rider-Waite-Smith system. Um, and modern decks are just phenomenal. There have always been really cool ones. Um, but there's just so many today that really they modernize the art, they diversify the art. Um, you get artists and tarot enthusiasts from across the world, like bringing their own visual takes on that symbolism. I tend to really love the Rider-Waite-Smith system because of the symbolism that's involved. So even the modern decks that don't go with like the traditional like 16th century styled art, um, and symbols, like it'll be modern symbols for those same archetypal energies and meanings behind them. Um, yeah, I've been at this for what are we in 2026? So 26 years now. I will joke that I'm a recovering Catholic, so I grew up with Catholicism, but there wasn't the household itself wasn't necessarily strictly Catholic. So my household was a combination of like Irish and Ukrainian. So on the Irish side, family members were predominantly those who were religious were Catholic, and then on the Ukrainian side, like my mother and her siblings went to Catholic school, but the that side of the family were actually Eastern Orthodox Christian. Um, so there was always like this blended take even on Christianity, and then there was never any like explicit like you have to be this faith. Just we were baptized Catholic. We went through confirmation and CCD. The younger generations did not, but the earlier generations of my family did. Yeah, and so I had that freedom in my preteen and teen years to really just branch out and explore. And it started off with me just, you know, joining friends when they would go to their churches and exploring different denominations, predominantly within Christianity. Um, but it wasn't until like the summer of 2000 when I really started to learn like because back then the internet was not what it is today. Today we get on and we can have like 50 tabs open. You're live streaming this right now without like insane buffering and having to wait 5 hours for it to download. Like um internet could not handle this back then. So we had like I think it was a 28, 26, 28K modem, dial up modem. Um, you had to have a landline phone, and the landline phone, because we didn't have cell phones, only super rich people had cell phones. Um, so like, and if you needed to make a phone call, you had to disconnect the internet to be able to make a phone call. Oh my goodness. Um, so you really had to, like get into like chat rooms because that was really the only way things could be like in real time. Otherwise, you'd have a single browser open with a single window open, and it could take like 5 to 10 minutes just for the page to come up. We learned the trick of like disabling photos and visuals. This is why I handle going online, and I love the long form content that's all written in text based because that's what I was used to. We would turn off the images just so the pages would open up. I've been researching about witches and like folklore recently for novel. Oh, okay, awesome. Yeah, so there is so much out there, and depending on um where you focus. So one of the really fun things with the word witch today is that we equate it with these very like folklore traditions as well as ceremonial magic. and things of that nature. Whereas if you're really like digging into like historical stuff, there's stuff today that we would call and refer to as witchcraft that back in the day, like they would never call it witchcraft. Like, but what they were doing was what we do today. It was just an issue with some mistranslations in some words and confusing some words around. Like the word Wicca itself literally means witch, but we conflated that with um, in England they had what was called the cunning folk, and so almost all of what Wicca was based on was on that those folk traditions and practices, and we conflated that, and so nowadays witch means way more than what it used to mean way back in the day. We're not actually burned in Salem witch trials. Right. So the Salem witch trials, they were hung or they were stoned to death. One of the most famous cases of a Salem witch trial was a gentleman who maintained uh, his innocence until his dying literal breath. He maintained his innocence, and the way that they killed him was by stoning. And it wasn't stoning like everybody picks up a stone and starts throwing it. It was taking like big, heavy stones, and you've got the person like bound, tied down, and you're just placing the stones on them. And so every time they'd ask him, like, "Are you a witch? You know, admit to your sins." And he would maintain his innocence and be like, "No, I'm not." And so they would keep piling the stones on until it literally crushed them to death. Um, so a lot of times, it's a misnomer when people refer to like the burning times, because of this. It's a bit of both. So magic. So the question. So again, I dual stream, so I try to repeat the questions for anybody who's not able to see the same chat window. So do you believe magic actually works, or is the practice more about intention and symbolism? So it's a bit of both. So magic, how you're defining magic is a big part of it. Um, and how your philosophy and approach to how it, like the mechanisms at work. Does it work? Yes. In that, can we actually cause changes in reality with our willpower, essentially, with our abilities of the mind, our psychic abilities, if you will? Yes, we have so much research. Much within the scientific community in terms of especially experimental science. Much of what sets the bar for like high quality, trustworthy science actually comes from from the subfield of psi research. So this is psychic ability research. And so those studies that come out of there are really like top of the line. They set the standard for other experimental sciences and other fields. That's how high quality these are in terms of statistical analysis and making sure everything is as uh, trying to find the word I'm looking for, um, but making sure everything is high quality, making sure that it's confirmable, testable, reliable. Um, that doesn't mean that every study, like if you're familiar with science, not every study is going to be perfect, and that's why you have to have so many studies. Why there's so much repetition. If you've ever actually read like a scientific report, like coming out of the science community and published in scientific journals, a good chunk of that is less about that study and more about what needs to happen to confirm the results found, to challenge the results found, and to continue researching the particular phenomena in question, and as well as anything that came up during the course of the study. And a lot of that, again, comes from psi research. So in that regard, yes. Does it work like what we see in movies and in fiction? Typically not. My own writing within fiction is often separating between fantasy kind of fiction or magic and actual here's real magic in effect. In terms of intention and symbolism, intention is part of it. Without intention, you're not going to get much. That said, it's only one tiny piece of the puzzle. I am not one of those. It's all about intention. And like, if it were all about intention and you could just light a candle and repeat affirmations day in, day out, the world would look very, very, very different than what it does. So intention is just a piece of it. Symbolism, likewise. You can sit there and open up books of correspondence and devise a spell using those correspondences, but if that symbolism does not mean for you what it says in those books, then it's not going to have the same effect. So it's usually more about personal symbolism. This is why we see a lot of people using sigil work. So especially if you're writing a novel involving witches and folklore, I would definitely look into different styles of sigils and see if any of those could be adapted into your story's magical system. Um, but that's part of why sigils have become so popular, is because you literally are creating your own symbols that have these deep, intricate meanings for you personally within your magic, and that's part of why those can be so powerful. Um, Whereas the rest of us, you take a basic symbol. So I pull this guy out every now and again. He's just like a little 3D printed gnome. I don't know if my camera will know. My camera hates trying to zoom in and will always zoom in on my face. Never wants to look at what I put up close to the camera. Anyway, like that gnome can represent like so many different things to so many different people. Some people have positive associations with gnomes and some have negative associations with gnomes. So depending on what your magical spell working is, that may or may not be the best symbol to use, but a book might be like, oh, you definitely want to include a figure of a gnome. Like you might not if you have a negative association with it and the working you're doing needs you to have a more positive association. I am bad at writing magic. Yeah, I mean it's one of those things where it depends on what you want to write. So like coming speaking personally from my writing experiences, I know that I would never do well in like Robert Jordan, Brandon Sanderson style, like deep, intricate magical systems across multiple massive volumes. I'm definitely more like we're going to keep it light and simple as far as the magic and the story goes. Then again, my writing when it comes to works of fiction, my writing tends to be more of the kind of the cerebral type. So there's a lot of um, inner dialogue and dialogue between characters. So it's there's the processing of information, but not so much the like hands-on doing of the things, except where necessary to keep the plot going. But that's just my personal style. So there's still ways to write your story without having to focus on the magic itself and how that works. One of the beautiful things about fiction writing is that when you have people who get frustrated and they're just like, how does this work? And it's like you can either choose to make something up and make that part of the lore of your story, or you can just smile and be like, you tell me. And let the reader kind of work that out for themselves. So fiction writing can be a lot of fun when we're using magic. um, and especially if you are researching like actual witchcraft, whether that's through like the old witch trials of around the world or otherwise. Um, oh, Instagram was coming towards me. Can I ask this? Oh, okay. So this is like an office hour, so we generally are discussing different questions. So it's not a tarot reading session, if that's what you're looking for. Um, but yeah, so while you're responding, I'll keep going. But yeah, so the night again, when it comes to writing these worlds, it is definitely helpful to pick what you want to focus on for your story, whatever makes the most sense in terms of looking into like the historical witches or accusations of witches in the case of the trials, like with the Salem witch trials, and those different types of magical systems in those records. But also like exploring, like if that's what makes sense to the story, the timeline, all that, do that. You can also look into different magical systems that exist today, whether that's through like modern day Wicca, or you have a lot of very specific niche folk traditions, like you get within like voodoo and hoodoo. There are various different, there are so many, the world over, there are folklore, and magical systems in place and folk practices and folk magic. Um, so a lot of what we see depicted in movies and in writing or even nonfiction, a lot of what we see getting published in books on the bookshelves and stores and available online, a lot of it tends to be very Eurocentric. But those are just one little piece of the magical puzzle that you can find across the world. Um, so definitely explore it. And then for the world of fiction that you're writing, you want to focus on that, whatever would make the most sense within the context of the story that you're writing. Hopefully that helped. But yeah, having it be about intention and symbolism, like especially in the world of fiction, having symbolism is really great to include in there. Especially because readers do tend to like having things that they can visualize and imagine for themselves as they're reading the story. Um, so that could definitely be really good for your writing. All right. So Oh, uh-oh. Split my screen. Let me fix that. Okay. And then Cinderella, did you have a question, or were you looking for, or were you trying to get like a tarot reading done? Okay, I'm not sure if they're typing, so I'm gonna go ahead um and move on. And then if there's any more questions, by all means, please drop them in the chat. I do prioritize what's in the chat. But I'm gonna take a look at some of my questions that came in beforehand. Um, okay, so this is great because I was just talking about this a second ago. So a question I was asked ahead of time was, what is the right way to craft sigils? So I have the answer, and you're not going to like the answer, and that's there's no right way. I have experimented with several different types. I don't know why, but I still think one of um, uh, the most effective way of writing sigils is where you take the full statement and you cross out the vowels, and then you kind of narrow it down to where you have like just single consonants, and then you kind of try to put those consonants together to form an image. And then if you're super artsy, you can make it super fancy. I'm not that level creative artist when it comes to drawing, so that doesn't really happen with mine. I don't know why, but I do find those to be the most effective for me personally. But there are many different types of sigil systems out there. There's some that involve like a circle and like lines that I cannot wrap my head around. I feel like I'm going to leave that to the mathematically inclined, because I feel like the my math skills that I lack in is involved somehow. But there are people who swear by those style sigils. And then I, of course, love the artistic ones where you just kind of bring your individual symbols that match your intention and kind of fit them together in a really arty, creative way. I have a lot of fun making those. I just don't, and they're very beautiful and I love to have them. But if I'm working on a very specific spell working, I don't find those to be as effective for me. Even as I love them and they're beautiful and I will happily share them. But yeah, there's many different styles and there's no right or wrong. It's all a matter of what works for you personally. And then I'm gonna see what popped back into the chat. So what I wrote was a character named Marion who was abused by her mother when she had enough. She accused her mother of being a witch, and of course she was burned. And Marion was met with the Order of Hollow Thorn, which is a witch's communion or something, which cursed Marion because she invoked this name witch to falsely accuse a person, and they were killed. Oh wow. Okay. Woo. Okay. So yeah, you definitely Salem witch trials is 100% like spot on historical records. You want to be digging in for things like that. A lot of Europe got a ton of different witchcraft trials. There's still modern day witch hunts. This is why a lot of us get really, really angry when politicians refer to things as being witch hunts. That, like, no, dude, like, this is no. There are literal witch hunts where people will be literally burned alive. Videos used to go around just a couple decades ago, and this stuff is still happening today, where the communities will dig a ditch or have the accused dig a ditch, and they'll shove them in there, and then they'll light branches and things on fire and toss them in there. And even as the person is like yelling and screaming their innocence and begging to be pulled out of the trench, they'll just let them burn alive. And then that becomes their grave. So these things really do happen. I know that's very dark. These things still happen today. So in addition to looking at those historical records, also looking at how do those dynamics play out today? What is it within the societies that would make somebody? So, like, what is it that leads this character to think like it was normal and okay to accuse her mother in that way, even knowing a likely outcome? Um, what was the motivation there? Like, we have records going back hundreds of years and even into the modern day of societies where these witch hunts happen like that. So there's tons of real life fodder, if you will, uh, to research to really get that story really in depth, really complex. And it would really attract a lot of readers. Um, yeah, and I do love the fact that there's like an actual an actual magical order there, cursing the character for what they've done. And this is where again the modern day records will be really good, because in the historical records, so many people being accused of what they were being accused of didn't even exist. Not to say that there weren't folklore and magical practices that today we would refer to as witchcraft that weren't going on during those times, and that there aren't hints of truth within those trial records, but um, they aren't being recorded by the practitioners. The dynamics, social dynamics of what was going on at the time makes them unreliable in terms of um, working out what is and isn't reflective of real life accurate information during that time frame. So one of the benefits to your writing of the story is having modern day practitioners that could inspire that magical order, like, and like what are their reasons for doing what they're doing, what does their system of magic actually look like versus what the society, like the accused are being accused of doing and believing. um Oh my goodness. I actually really want to read your story now. I know you're still writing it, but I'm actually, the more I think about it, I'm like, actually, I really want to read the story. So definitely keep me posted on this, because as you work on it, I would, and especially if you publish or anything like that, I would love to have a read of that story. Um, because that's definitely right up my alley. But yeah, there's a lot of information. Definitely Salem witch trials, and look into some of the more modern cases. Because the nice thing about modern cases is we have more structured anthropology where people are going into these communities and researching, and journalists recording what they're observing, without the same biases as what existed during the European witch trials. Um, so definitely a blend of those two, I think, would be the best records for you to go into for writing that story. Um, okay, where are we at on time? Okay, so we still have some more time. So if you have more questions, by all means. Oh yeah, you're welcome. I I love writing. I don't do it as much fiction writing as I used to. But I have, oh my goodness, I somehow still, despite dozens of moves and losing so much things over the years, I somehow still have like files and notebooks filled with like the beginnings and drafts and outlines of so many different fictional worlds and stories and things. Most of which will never go beyond what they exist in those folders right now, but some of them might come back to life. But yeah, so I love writing. One of those, I used to be a classroom teacher. I taught science, But I would always joke, I'm like, I could teach social studies, I could teach language arts, I could teach humanities, because I'm just all around nerdy in all those ways. But yeah, so definitely check those out. That'll definitely help out. Um, let's see, where are we at again? So 142. So I can probably squeeze in at least 2, 3 more questions depending on um how deep I go into answering them. Uh, this was an interesting question. So this one is: are there any metaphysical topics that are strictly forbidden? Um, Not that I know of. I imagine within specific groups, you might have topic areas, so like within the cult practice and esoteric practice. If you're part of a particular magical order or initiatory uh, practice, I'm sure there would be areas that would be off limits in some way, particularly depending on your level of experience, role within the order, because usually uh, things of that nature tend to be hierarchical. So it's kind of one of those like, okay, well, if you're a recent initiate, you're probably not going to get those super advanced copies of whatever volume of lore that particular tradition recognizes. Um, so I'm sure there's going to be some people who might say that there are, but metaphysically wise, like metaphysics tend to be like the word sounds, so like physics, right? So we know physics being the movement, matter, energy, right? Work, all these different things. So physics is not just like how do you get from point A to point B. Like there's a little bit more to it in terms of what physics covers. And then when we talk metaphysics, that meta aspect, these are the things that like current science can't study. So there's some things that now are within the realm of science that didn't used to be. So like we were talking about the psi research previously, and like now we have, because of things studied there, you now have medical sciences looking into brain waves and the effects of different sound waves on physiological health. You've got MRIs of brain scans showing different parts of the brains lighting up and things. And so much of that stuff that we're seeing, actual concrete physiological, we can point to this and we can observe it and we can make inferences based on what we observe. So much of that was based on studying metaphysical topics, trying to understand how come if I hear this sound, I feel this kind of way, but if I hear that sound, feel this kind of way. Does that affect everybody? What is it about it? And being able to kind of really fine tune that. And then as advancements were made just in the metaphysical approach, you start to see it be brought into science. So metaphysical topics tend to be those things that are or can be approached scientifically speaking, that then as science is able to advance and then study those things, it gets into there. Unfortunately, you also find a lot of pseudoscience kind of finds its way into metaphysical communities because of this. But what defines metaphysical itself tends to be this element to it where we are approaching those things that cannot currently be studied scientifically with the tools and the knowledge and the advances that we currently have. But over time, we expect it to be brought in. So it might get written off. So like within metaphysics, like I said, pseudoscience tends to come in there, creep in there, and we look at it, we investigate it within the metaphysical community, and we go, you know what, this is all hogwash. Never mind. And so that's something that will never get picked up by science because the metaphysical community has already been able to rule it out as pseudoscience. So metaphysics, I don't think that there is any, like, it's so broad and it's so uh, so spirituality in nature that I don't think there's anything that would be considered strictly forbidden. But again, if you're talking about a specific group or uh, practitioner within the metaphysical communities, they personally might have things where they're like, oh, I don't teach that. Like I have things that I'll be like, I won't teach you about that because I don't feel that that is a safe topic to be sharing in this kind of a way. That doesn't mean that I want to gatekeep that information, but for safety. Like I said, I taught ninth grade science, and I would tell them all the time, like, you're going to eventually go, for those of you who go on to earn advanced degrees in, physics or chemistry or whatever, you're going to look back at these lessons that I'm teaching you right now and tell me that I was full of crap and I taught you all the wrong things. And it's like, no, this was how you build a foundation so that when you get to those levels, you can understand it and be safe with it. And that's the same thing within esoteric and metaphysical topics. Is it's not so much a gatekeeping of any topics. They're not really forbidden in that sense. It's more of a kind of scaffolding, like, okay, we learn here so we can get you to here, so we can get you to here, because by the time you get to here, if you're missing this, bad things can happen. And what those bad things are really depends on the very specific nitty gritty. So this is a very generalized response. So we're going to keep the bad things being very broad, generalized, put your imagination to it. Um, so hopefully that helped. Yeah, I don't think there's any metaphysical topics that are strictly forbidden in that sense. Okay, so back to the chat. I was thinking the witches curse Marion to become a witch, almost like an irony, where she falsely accused her own mother of being one, only to become one herself. Oh, that would be so much fun. Yeah, I would definitely look into a couple of different um, systems of magical practice for that. That way you can see like the order has like one style and approach to magic, and then Marion ends up with like this very much more like version that's like her own unique version. I think that would be really cool. Oh, I'm so excited for this book. You've already sold me. All right. Let's see. Not ready for himself. All right, let me see if I have any more. Oh my goodness, this cat. Yes, yes, we all see you. I don't know if you can hear her when she meows. She meows so quietly. I don't know that it would show up in the mic. But she was right at the mic when she meowed. We will find out. All right, so oh wow. Okay, so this is a good question. It may or may not help you while you're doing your research. So I was asked, what does respect look like for tradition that is not part of the mainstream? Um, so a lot of times the more mainstream traditions, just like mainstream religions, there tends to be fairly clear, sometimes spoken, sometimes unspoken, ideas of how to be respectful about it. So like, for example, um, somebody whose religious practice involves praying before they eat a meal, it's very obvious that if somebody sits down in the loud, crazy, chaotic cafeteria and you see them start to go into a quiet moment of reflection, maybe their eyes are downcast or closed, and you see them kind of either whispering to themselves or just sitting there silently without touching their food, going over to them and loudly being like, "Hey, what are you doing?" That would be kind of disrespectful because they're clearly praying before they eat their meal, and that's part of their religious practice. So some examples like that tend to be really easy to be like, "Oh, this is a really easy way to show respect is allow them to finish, wait for them to start eating, and then you can ask them questions if you have questions to ask them." But other times it could be a little bit more nuanced, especially when they aren't mainstream, then we don't really know too much about them. Um, and what's really interesting with a lot of faiths, and this is includes the mainstream, is there is what our personal understanding of what they are, what they look like, what they sound like, and what would be a sign of respect, and then there's the reality of it. Right now in the U.S., we see a lot of people of mainstream religions who are basically like, can we end religious hate because they are themselves uh, religious or part of the mainstream, but they are feeling disrespected because it's like, this is a mainstream religion. Like, you should know those super basic things. Like, if I'm sitting there and I'm praying it in the busy cafeteria and you sit there and loudly scoff at me from across and be like, oh, look at that guy praying over his meal. Like, that is hugely disrespectful. And yet people are doing it all the time. So respecting traditions that aren't part of the mainstream would be the same way as you would respect a mainstream faith is if you're not sure, ask. Ask a question. Be like, hey, I noticed you got really quiet there for a minute. Like, are you okay? Is this something you do for every meal? Is this part of your faith? Um, I'm one of those, like, I am not afraid to be asked those questions. And the biggest sign of respect is just what what their response to those questions is, respecting any boundaries that are established. So, um, for example, somebody coming to me and they see me say or do a thing, or they have questions about, they heard that, like, or hold on, let me rephrase. So they come to me, they see that I'm a tarot reader, so then they start to have questions about, well, are you a witch? Are you a this? Are you a that? And it's like, I tend to be very open and share, but there may be some days and some times or some settings where it's like, ooh, not here, not now. Um, and so me saying like, hey, thank you for asking, but I don't really feel comfortable talk about this right now. And usually I hand off a card and I might be like, but you can call me or email me, let me know. Text me later. And so that's one way of explaining a boundary when I'm like, I'm uncomfortable talking about this. So if they respond in that way, the biggest way to show respect to that tradition and that practitioner of that tradition is to simply just be like, okay, and then just back off. If they decide they want to talk about it, listening and actually hearing them. And when you have questions, ask the questions. Don't be snarky with your questions. But respectfully just ask, like, hey, so I heard this. Is this accurate? Or, oh, I was reading this thing, or I was watching this thing, and XYZ, and um, see how that goes. I think one of my and this isn't just matters of faith. I also get this when it comes to the fact that I'm also vegan. Um, I will have people, even people who are trained to talk to people in respectful ways, who will start going on and on and on about some person in some reality TV show. And it's like, anybody who knows anything about reality TV shows knows that that is not reflective of reality. And that anything that actually ends up airing on the TV tends to be the most extreme of whatever happened within the entire filming. Um, so it can come across as very disrespectful if you're going on and on about this reality TV show thing, or something somebody somewhere told you, or you got, from your fifth cousin 80 times removed, like, so it's an extreme example. I think at 80 times removed, I don't think that counts as family anymore, um, genealogically speaking. But the point is that they are listen to and wait for an answer. And you can say things like, hey, I watched this reality show and there was this character that XYZ. Is that like actually real? Like, you can ask things like that, but don't go on and on and on about whatever depiction or rumor or stereotype or whatever that you heard, because that's when you start bordering into disrespect. The best way to be respectful um, is to ask those questions. And if you are not in a position of asking somebody from those traditions, but you are speaking about those traditions, is just admitting what you do and don't know. So like, I know a lot about a lot of things, especially within witchcraft and pagan communities. That said, there's so many different paths and approaches, and every year there are like new off branches that happen. There are shifts, sometimes subtle, sometimes not subtle at all, in how people talk about it, how people approach it, how people practice it. Um, and so it can change so drastically over the course of decades that a particular tradition that I was really well educated in 15 years ago, me speaking on it today, I'm not going to say, oh, well, people who follow this path do XYZ. I'm usually going to say, like, my understanding is, or I might say, like, hey, you might want to reach out to somebody because here's what it was like then. I'm not sure how that is today. Um, a great case in point is when I talk about Wicca, is that, putting that disclaimer in there that I identify as a Wiccan flavored witch. I don't call myself Wiccan as I did 20 years ago, because what was defined as Wicca and how that word was used was way broader than what it is today. And even today, I still maintain that there are like the eclectic and approaches to Wicca still exist. It's one of those like you can't put the cat back in the bag. I always think of that when they did the all women cast reboot for Ghostbusters, and there's a scene where they're like, "Are you trying to ask me to put the cat back into the bag?" And they're like, "Yes, that's exactly what they're asking you to do." And it's like, "But you can't. The cat's out of the bag." And I always think about that little back and forth, like you can't get the cat back in the bag once the cat's out the bag. And that's kind of how it is with a lot of these paths. Is they are going to change. They are going to evolve. The way we talk about them is going to shift and change. That said, everything that came before still came before. So it's still part of that narrative. It's still part of those traditions. Um, so especially traditions that aren't in the mainstream, even if you learn a lot about them today, if you don't continue to actively be part of them and learn them for yourself over the course of 5 to 10 years, what you learned about them a decade ago is not going to be the same as a decade from now. Um, and it's just because of the way that traditions change. And this is across religions. This is even with the mainstream faith. You will find specific denominations and specific, uh, what's the other term? Sects or, there's so many different terms for it now. But within a lot of witchcraft and pagan, we usually use the word tradition. And it can vary and it can change and it can adapt, sometimes for better, sometimes for not so good. Which is why it's always good to ask questions, because that's usually how you find out where the person you're currently talking to stands and how to be respectful toward them is by asking those questions. Again, my answer is also slightly biased because I tend to take a more chaplain-like approach to religion and spirituality. Is part of why I personally am seeking to become a chaplain formally, um, because it's that capacity to honor somebody's spiritual health regardless of what tradition or path they personally walk. Even if that is full on atheists where they don't have a spiritual bone in their body, they still possess spiritual health, and there's a way to address that spiritual health, even of those who claim to be non-spiritual. Um, and that again goes to knowing how to respect somebody whose worldview and um, spiritual views differ from your own. And a lot of it is just being curious and open and listening and really hearing what they have to say, whether you agree with it or not. It's the best way to learn how to talk with one another. All right, so I think I kind of really, really deeply dove into that question. And I think I'm going to leave it there because we are coming up on the 2 o'clock mark here in like a matter of a few seconds. So unless you have any more questions in the chat, I think I will go ahead and get us into our outro. If you do have questions, pop them in there. But I'm going to start our outro in the meantime. All right. So, getting back into those updates for about the schedule. So normally these lunar lunch breaks are every Monday at 1 p.m. But now that we're entering into busy season, some personal changes to my schedule on my end to reduce conflicts and having to postpone, I'm going to make these lunar lunch breaks only once a month instead of on a weekly basis. It's going to be on a monthly basis. So I'm going to be doing the third Mondays beginning in September. So we're going to keep the same time of 1 p.m. Eastern here in the U.S. I forget what EDT zone it is. I think it's like -5 or something. I always get confused on those. I always have to look up a thing to help me. I have to get a calculator. So again, this is the biggest change is just that the schedule is going to change. For August, we will still be here. I think we have one more week of this month. Yes, so I will still be here next week on the 31st at 1 p.m. And then starting in September, it'll only be on the third Monday. Another really big update that I'm super excited for is the Witch Space. So if you're not familiar, they just had like their inaugural conference week just earlier this month. And this was an opportunity for various different leaders and speakers within the witchcraft community that were offering different talks, lessons, and everything. It was a paid event, so but the Witch Space app is going to be continuing. So they will have speakers throughout the week, different times throughout the day. They are currently reaching out to those of us who teach on these topics and asking us to fill these voids. Most talks will require a membership to access. So there is a paid element to it. However, the more beginner intro witch related talks will be available for free, give you an opportunity to explore them, see what the Witch Space app is like, and see if it's for you. So that could be really good if you are just a seeker and you are just trying to kind of get an idea of stuff. I know I have been asked to do more intermediate talks, which means mine will be behind the paywall. But I will definitely be keeping you guys posted if that changes at any time. I have not yet set the date for my first talk, but I'm hoping to have that date before next Monday. So I will definitely be letting you guys know next Monday when that will be. The other big thing is, of course, I announced this last week, but the Empowered Readings course is coming soon. So this is going to be a full course version of one of my workshops that teaches how to do readings, whether they're tarot readings or if you do, oh, I just realized I have a typo on my slide saying readings. So if you needed to know whether I wrote this or AI wrote this, I promise you I write my own slides. So the Empowered Readings course. So this is basically my style of doing collaborative divination. So like to where it is empowering. It leaves people uplifted no matter what the reading comes. It doesn't mean that readings are light and fluffy and happy-go-lucky. I will cheerlead like it's nobody's business and give you the happy sides of things. If tough things come up in a reading, but the person getting the reading will never walk away feeling down or cursed or miserable. Like there will be something about the reading to lift them up, to get them through whatever is going on. And that is my approach and style to readings, and that is what this workshop that I'm turning into this course teaches. So if you want to get in on that, definitely make sure to check out the coming soon page. Again, depending on which platform you're on, you may already see it in the description. Otherwise, I will have that posted hopefully within a few minutes of this. It usually takes me about an hour. I say a few minutes, but honestly, it usually takes me about an hour between the end of these live streams and when I have the show notes updated to have that information for you. But yeah, so definitely check that out. Actually, you know what? Do I have that link available now? I do. I can get to that link right now and post that in the chat. That way, if you're on right now, you don't have to wait. Look at me thinking ahead. Okay, so that is the coming soon link that should show up in the chat here momentarily. And so if you want to, that email address does not sign you up for anything. The only email you'll get will be the email announcing when the course goes live. I don't have the set date, but again, hopefully I will have that for you when we do next week's live stream. All right. And switching. I need my sources. Make sure the cat did not mute me. Okay. Reminders. Oh, gotta click that. There we go. Reminders. All right. So as always, oops, sorry, trying to do this on two different screens. It is not cooperating with me. So as always, do subscribe to the Starlight Circle. That's my monthly newsletter. I only send it once per month, usually in the second half of the month. So the one for this month has already gone out last week. This gives you updates on any upcoming events where you can find me live in person free. It's also where you'll get any big announcements. If I'm offering any sort of discounts or anything, it's a place to check that out. You can also enroll in the Tarot 101, which would be really good, Xander, if you're looking for some free content for stuff. It goes into all the details about like the origins of tarot and how tarot is used historically and today. So definitely worth checking out. So whether you use it to learn tarot for yourself or if you're just using it as some ideas for, what to implement within your own story world, definitely worth checking out. It is designed for seekers and skeptics alike, so I throw a little actual science in there for you guys. And it also provides a really strong foundation. So if you are interested in that empowered readings course, which don't currently have a system of divination, it will really help out with being prepared for that course. Also for socials, I'm most active on Blue Sky and YouTube. You can find me elsewhere, but those are where I am most active. YouTube is the best place to check for any updates related to these live streams. I do post on, I think it's on the community tab when you go to the channel. I do post things on there too, like if there's any changes to the schedule, if there's any last minute changes, that's the best place to check. The other one, I've been mentioning this for the last couple of weeks or so, but I'm going to mention again, is the Hellas story events after Ragnarok, according to Loki's daughter. This is my spiritual fiction novel that I wrote back in 2012 that just got a facelift this year. Let me fix that. So this is the new cover for those who haven't already seen it. So just some editing. There's no AI involved in it at all. It was all hand done by me, which means that there are still typos. There are still issues. My son pointed out one to me that's in the print copy. So if you're not sure, that'll be the giveaway. But yeah, so that is currently available on Amazon. By around this time next month, I'll be able to start expanding it beyond Amazon. But in the meantime, that is where you will find it. Okay, and then back to this screen. So let's close that. And then finally, if there's no more questions, your next step is to join that Empowered Readings course waitlist if that is something you are interested in. Definitely make sure that you do that today if you have even the remotest interest. If you're not sure, just go ahead and pop your email into that. Again, I won't be using your email for anything other than sending out an email notice to everybody that the course is ready when it does go live. And then again, the next lunar lunch break, we do have the last one for August will be next Monday. And then after that, we start on the new third Mondays at 1 p.m. If you cannot make it, you can always send me an email or message me on social with your questions, and I will add them to my list to answer in the next live stream. As always, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to this channel, whether you're on Twitch or YouTube. Make sure to subscribe. That is the best way to know when I go live. Otherwise, if you're squirrel brain like me, you're likely to forget. The best way to know when my channel goes live is by subscribing. You can also like and comment on the video to help the algorithms learn what you actually like, especially as the algorithms, the search algorithms on across Google, so that includes YouTube, have changed recently. Back in late May, early June, they changed a lot of it. So a lot of our content is no longer showing up. So if you want things to show up that you like, make sure not just my videos, but any videos that you are like, ooh, I want more of these, make sure you're liking and commenting to get that, to get those algorithms to actually show you what you want and what you need more of. All right, so that is basically all I have for today. So thank you so much for joining me and for all of your questions. I really appreciated you being here with me, and definitely thank you, Xander, shout out to Xander for sharing the story elements. Definitely looking forward to that. So definitely keep us in the loop for as you are finishing writing that up and publishing, because we definitely want to know how the story goes. All right. So that is it for today. And so, as always, keep radiating hope into the world. And I will see you next week.